There are some scientific truths that everyone seems to know. Among these is some version or other of for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. We know that if you do something, there is a result. If you make a choice, there is a consequence. That if you agitate an animal, it will probably bite you. If you piss off someone else, they will probably retaliate. And that if you try and run from the cops and they see you, they're not going to be happy when they catch you. So this particular episode is about the fact that choices have consequences, which is one of the variations of this particular scientific law. And it takes us back to 2010, September 2010. I was working in the lab, and a policeman knocked on the door, and when I answered it, he told me that my car had been involved in an accident. At first, I was stupefied by the utterance because I found it almost entirely incomprehensible to think that my car had been in an accident since I was not in it. But the officer took me out to the parking lot and to the scene of the crime where my car was in the landscaping at work. Apparently a young man who had only a few weeks earlier graduated from high school, turned 18 and started college, had backed his father's pickup truck into my car and then tried to flee the scene. The campus police happened to be watching at the time, ran him down, stopped him, confronted him, and when he claimed that he didn't know he'd hit anyone and they confronted him with the evidence, they decided to arrest him and then come and get me. Because essentially what he had done was a felony hit and run, fleeing the scene of an accident. Now, we waited for the boy's father. I'm not sure why, but that was the choice that we made. I think it was because I was trying to figure out what the devil to do. Meanwhile, we tried to get the car out. And this is how we know that his story didn't hold any water. Not only had he hit me and pushed me, he'd pushed me over one of those concrete barriers that exist in the parking lot as a stopping device to tell you, oh, you've gone too far before you hit the curb, over the curb behind that, and then 8 feet past that into the bushes. And it took the lieutenant and at least 3 other officers to come and help push the car, free the car, and then put things down so I could get out of the landscaping without destroying anything on the undercarriage of my car. As I thought about this today, I thought, I wonder if this is why the engine on that car ultimately was damaged and destroyed, is from that accident, and I just had no idea that it had happened. Because it was only about 10,000 miles later that the coolant and the oil mixed and the engine got trashed. At the time, my car only had 200,000 miles. It was 15 years old, 200,000 miles, and looks like it has leprosy because the clear coat on the paint was typical of that particular era for many cars and had peeled off and peeled some of the paint off with it. When the father arrived, he contended that it was not a big deal and that I should just let it go because my car was obviously a piece of crap and not worth anything. This is where I got angry. He had pushed me into the landscaping, broken both of my taillights, dented the bumper, and I didn't know at the time, but he had damaged the trunk mechanism so that you couldn't unlock the trunk with a key. You could only unlock it with the bar just inside the front door, which was fine because I didn't use it that much. But the car was damaged, clearly from him. You know, there's plastic pieces on the ground. So something had hit my car, a baseball bat, his truck, something, a meteor from outer space, something had hit me and had caused damage to the car in the parking lot, or else I had had the forethought to scatter plastic shards all over the place and stage the scene, hoping that someone would back into me and the cops would see it. But it didn't help that the police had seen it and the lieutenant was there. They already had the police report. They had everything in hand, and the father made this asinine comment. I took great exception to this because it was worth a great deal to me. It was a running and functional car. Maybe it isn't pretty. He showed up in a Mercedes, so maybe you can figure that that's an issue of his evaluation. But the point of the matter is that the car was worth something to me because it functioned, and now it was actually not street legal. And he thought that there should be no consequences. I said, stop. Your son has a felony hit and run pending. I can take him to court and he will get kicked out of school. He will not be eligible to get a lot of jobs. How much is my car worth to you? Now, there was a lot of balking and going back and forth with the police watching and sometimes chiming in. I think ultimately they were disappointed with the choice that I made. I had no real interest in taking this to court and burying this kid. As arrogant and childish as he was, it seems a bit excessive to destroy a man's future for a momentary lapse in judgment and probably some panicked overcorrection on his part. Clearly, the father had not taught him to respect other people's things, regardless of how nice they look or how valuable they might be. Because 100,000 miles later, I was still able to sell the car for $500 to someone else. So obviously it was worth something, just not to him, until I explained that he had one of two options. He could make it right, or I would let the court decide what was right, which would probably involve his son being convicted of a felony and sent to prison. And it was upon that point and the intercession of his wife that they ceded the point and agreed to make it right. So that's the deal here. We have too many people in this world, in this country, in this state, in this school, maybe in your immediate vicinity, who think that consequences only matter when other people do evil things and that benefits only matter when they do good things. It's sort of an irony that the only people in our society who are regularly praised for good behavior are criminals who are incarcerated for bad behavior. Once you go to jail, they pay meticulous attention to who's on good behavior, because someone's paid to do that, because for some reason we count that when we take them before parole. But there are some people who believe that the only thing in their life that should matter is their good behavior, and the only thing that should matter in the lives of others is their bad behavior. And so you see this happen where they excoriate religious leaders, political leaders, corporate leaders, class leaders, family leaders, people who aren't leaders at all, people who are teenagers, and say that my good deeds are all that matter and your bad deeds are all that matter. And that's an incongruity that is completely incompatible with civil society. Whether I decide there are consequences or not, that's up to me. But there is some consequence. If I had let the kid go unpunished, there would have been nothing. I would have been the only one who had consequences. And it wasn't like it was a big deal. But it was a teachable moment where the kid needed to learn, and I don't know if he learned it or not, that when you do something, something happens. And if something bad happens, you have an obligation to repair it and correct it and make it right. And that was really what I was trying to impose upon this family is I didn't really care about how much money they gave me. I didn't need thousands of dollars. I mean, I took it to 3 body shops. They did full workups for everything that was wrong, including repainting the car, which would have been nice, but I wasn't going to do it, and I never did repaint the car in the 9 more years that I owned it. So I didn't expect them to pay for that, but I did expect them to pay for the things that were necessary to make it right. Repair and replacement of the fender, the lights, the hood assembly, the bumper. Whether I did them or not, those were things that were fine until he backed into me, and that would not have been as big of a problem if he hadn't tried to get away. I'm grateful the cops caught him, because otherwise I would have just had to deal with it. And that's what happens with a lot of people, is that people think that it's only a crime if you get caught. And that's not true. There is something that happens. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not even to you, but everything you do reverberates around you. You've heard of the universe and karma and dogma, and you drop a rock in the lake and the ripples go out and they influence things very far from the rock, and sometimes in a deleterious manner. So whatever you do affects other things around you. And when you impact them in a negative way, and then you take the Buddhist notion that it's okay to just say, oops, I'm sorry, that doesn't repair anything. Your guilt makes no attempt and has no effect on setting the universe right. Because it's one thing to send out the ripple of evil. It's another then to make it right, because that also sends out ripples. Okay? These are 2 acts, where hopefully the one that you do on the second part counteracts the negative effects of the one you did on the first part. I don't know if this kid learned his lesson, because I don't think the father had instilled in him a respect for the individuals, respect for other people, or a sense of responsibility. So I don't know if the kid learned or if there were any consequences for the kid whatsoever. In an ideal world, the father would have made the kid pay it back out of his allowance or his scholarship money or something. But since the kid was so nonchalant about hitting me and then tried to claim that he had no concept that anything had happened, evince that those values and morals may have actually been absent. This kid is now 27 years old. I have never seen him since then, which is okay, but I wonder sometimes how he's turned out. And I wonder about his parents. Are they still trying to claim that other people don't matter because what they have is not of value to them? Different does not denote deficient. Different is just different. And it's high time that we remembered that, and that whatever you do affects other people, for better or for worse. So if you do something that makes people's lives worse, it is incumbent upon you and a concomitant responsibility that you take action to rectify and repair what you destroy in the first place. All actions have consequences, and for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. At some point, this kid, if he had escaped the consequences from me, would have been slapped by the universe in some way, shape, or form, because all life has to be balanced. That's a principle we learn in biology, chemistry, and physics. So whether you believe in a God or whether you believe in math, everything eventually balances itself out, and nobody escapes consequences. You just put them off for a while. So if you're putting something off, as we get into the Christmas season, now is the time to make it right. This Christmas season, think about what you can do to repair what you have broken, to rectify what you have turned astray, and to take actions to make ripples in your life that send out good energy and transform the lives of the people around you and distal to you in positive ways. Have a good evening. Merry Christmas. Godspeed and good night.